The committee will come to order. I am required to read what all of us have heard several times, so in case you weren't listening the previous times, you're going to get to hear it again because I've been told I have to do it. I'd like to welcome the members who are joining today's markup remotely. Those members are reminded that they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identifying verification. When joining the proceeding, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Members participating remotely must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the proceedings unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. If a member who is participating remotely experiences technical difficulties, please contact the committee staff for assistance, and they will get you reconnected. When recognized, video or remotely attending members participating will be broadcast into the room via the television internet feeds. Members participating remotely are asked to mute their microphone when they are not speaking. Members participating remotely will be recognized normally for asking questions, but if they want to speak at another time, they must seek recognition verbally. In all cases, members are reminded to unmute their microphone. Unmute your microphone before. Don't fall out of your chair, and please don't hurt yourself. Members should be aware that there is a slight lag of a few seconds between the time you start speaking and the camera shot will switch to you. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep software platforms' video functions on for the entirety of the time they attend the proceeding. Those members may leave and rejoin the proceedings. If members depart for a short period for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin when they return. Members are also advised that I have designated a committee staff member to, if necessary, mute unrecognized members. Yes, I can shut you down. Microphones, to conceal any inadvertent background noise that may disrupt the proceedings. Members may use the software platform's chat function to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical issues only. Finally, remotely participating members should see a 5-minute clock down count on the software platform's display, but if necessary, I will hit your remote button and you will lose connectivity, or at least voice. Well, Jackie, we got to do something about this. Why should we take time to do that? I don't know. So, having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order this joint hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee and Military Personnel Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee. Over the course of the past 2 years, the Readiness Subcommittee has been heavily engaged in oversight of the private military family housing program through several formal committee events, numerous meetings with families, advocacy groups, private partners, and the Department of Defense personnel. We have been at work to improve the quality of housing provided to our service members and their families. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020 contained a substantial housing reform package that included, among other things, a Tenants' Bill of Rights that serves as the foundation of enhanced accountability for the quality of privatized military family housing. Over the last year, we've been heavily focused on implementation of those reforms, and while there is still work to be done, we've made some progress. However, we just heard from family housing advocates, and there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. And this hearing is to move in that direction. I'd like to thank those, the 3 partners who are with us today for joining us and for participating in the hearing. I suspect it's not been easy, and certainly we've not always agreed with what you have accomplished thus far, and of course we want more to be done. But at least you've shown up for the discussion, and you're prepared to answer what are undoubtedly going to be tough questions from the members of the committee. Unfortunately, another partner, I don't want to call him a partner, but Clark Realty Capital has declined our invitation to join this hearing. I am really upset about this. In fact, I am gravely disappointed by their decision, and it raises concerns about their willingness and their ability to be transparent and to be responsive not only to Congress, but far more importantly, to the families that are in their homes. So, as we conduct our oversight of the privatized military housing program, Clark Realty, you are clearly in the sights of this committee, and we will be assessing which of our oversight tools might be brought to bear to get answers from your organization. We've heard from advocates at Fort Belvoir in the previous meeting before this committee commenced, and we heard some very disturbing testimony. So, since Clark, you won't come to us, we're going to go to you. And I've invited my colleague, Ms. Spear, to join us on a little sachet down the river to find out what's going on at Fort Belvoir and why Clark has had such bad review. So heads up, we're coming your way, and we may not give you much time to know when we arrive. Another thing that we heard in the previous meeting was that the Bill of Rights is good but lacks teeth. So we're going to see if we can find some teeth and how we might find it to be enforced. So with that, just a couple of final words. Military families deserve quality housing, and they deserve responsive property management. And this committee will continue to use all of the tools at our disposal to make sure that those families get both quality housing and responsive answers to whatever concerns they may have. So with that, my ranking member, Doug Lamborn, it's your turn. Then I'm going to turn to Ms. Spear and her ranking member. Mr. Lamborn.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. Today we will hear testimony from 3 of the 4 invited partner companies that participate in the Privatized Military Housing Initiative. I want to echo the Chairman's comments about today's witnesses. I very much appreciate the engagement by the companies present today and am disappointed that not all attended. Over the past 2.5 decades, the military housing private-public venture has been utilized to provide housing options for our military families. Unfortunately, the program has also experienced serious management, health and safety, and oversight concerns. As someone whose district is home to 48,000 active duty military members, I know that our military families deserve better, and I will not stop fighting to ensure that these issues are resolved. In 2018 and 19, largely the result of a Reuters investigative series, military families from across the country came forward to share problems about their living conditions under the program. This subcommittee held numerous hearings in response to concerns about mold, rodents, poor customer service, and poor management. It became clear that there were systemic issues within the Privatized Military Housing Initiative that required significant attention. Both the NDAA for fiscal year 20 and the NDAA for fiscal year 21 contained bipartisan provisions to reform and strengthen oversight of the program. One such provision was the requirement for the Department of Defense, in coordination with the private partners, to develop and promulgate a Tenants' Bill of Rights. The NDAA mandated 18 rights, and since 2019, 15 have already been implemented and available to military families. But I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on their perspective of why the remaining 3, universal lease, dispute resolution, and 7-year maintenance history, have not yet been made available to all of our military families. I'm also concerned with the financial stability of some of the housing projects within the military housing program. The Military Privatization Initiative began as a way to modernize family housing, improve efficiency, and grow reserves for future improvements. Today, many of the agreements are roughly at the midpoint of their 50-year term. While we are aware of some significant new investments, the fact remains that old housing units inherited into the program will need to be recapitalized. we must continue to assess the financial condition of the agreements to ensure that new investments and improvements can be made. I welcome ideas today from the witnesses on how to find solutions in cases where projects are not receiving adequate cash flow to sustain home quality for our service members. According to the Military Housing Advocacy Network, despite the progress made in the past two NDAAs, thousands of military families are still living in substandard housing. We just left a briefing where we heard complaints from various family advocacy groups, so we know that problems persist, and we know how important Congress's continued oversight is. 2 years ago, at another hearing with program partners, I made it clear that reform was needed and in a way that preserves the sound financial footing of each project so that military families receive housing commensurate with the sacrifices that they make for each of us. Today, I am committed to seeing this through. I want to thank the witnesses for your engagement, and I look forward to learning more about your perspectives on the program, your progress implementing congressional reforms of the past two NDAAs so far, as well as your ideas to improve the quality and experience of privatized military housing for our service members and their families. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lamborn. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to welcome our witnesses. I appreciate your attendance to these critical issues. I want to call out the irresponsible conduct of Clark Realty Capital and convey to them, you can run, but you cannot hide. And we will, in fact, be visiting Fort Balfour. And I just realized that 5 out of the 9 installations in which they have contracts are in California, and I intend to see many of those and hope, Mr. Chairman, you will join me in that as well. I had wanted to ask them questions about lagging implementation of the Tenant Bill of Rights and resident dissatisfaction at Fort Belvoir due to shoddy maintenance and improper remediation of environmental hazards. Our military families face unacceptable health and safety issues every single day in, of all places, their homes. Taking care of one of the most basic needs of our families, their housing, is something we must get right every time. And some of you have failed in too many instances. We have heard and seen firsthand the horror stories in these houses, from mold to water leaks to incorrect lead abatement that has directly affected the health and safety of these families. I have visited Fort Hood and met military families who've been living in these unacceptable housing conditions, who've seen their children suffer health problems after mold consumed their homes and belongings, even a baby's crib. You are solely responsible for the correction of these defects and the management of these properties. So I want to hear what you've done to make this right for the affected families and why it took congressional action to get it done. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. And I will have to excuse myself very briefly to go make a presentation on the floor.
Thank you. Ms. Spear, thank you very much for your participation. Your responsibility on the Personnel Committee is integral to us. I look forward to working with you, and if you can travel through the bases of California, that would be good too. Thank you so very much, and when you return, we will carry forward. Thank you. Mr. Banks.
Unmute me. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to welcome our privatized military housing partners that are attending today's hearing. Unfortunately, Clark Realty, one of the housing partners we wanted to hear from, declined the committee's invitation. I'd like to note that Clark is the privatized military partner managing Fort Belvoir, an area where a group of our military families are reporting significant concerns. I think you will all agree that our military families deserve the best housing experiences that we can provide them. They should not have to worry about excessive mold, pest infestation, asbestos, open sewage, radon gas, and other environmental health conditions in some of the housing units. They also should not have to worry about cumbersome property management issues regarding lagging response times, withholding work, and in some instances, retribution for bringing housing problems forward. We have got to do a lot better. Over the last couple of NDAAs, we have made extensive reforms in military privatized housing to include the tenant bill of rights. We also know some things have improved. But what I would like to understand today is why we continue to hear from some of our military families that things are not improving. I'd also like to understand from your perspective what challenges still persist and why. Thank you again for your attendance today, and I yield back.
Mr. Aycock, if you'll join us.
I have joined, sir.
Very good. Please, let's hear from you, your testimony. We have your written testimony, so please proceed.
Thank you very much, sir. Chairwoman Spear, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Banks, Ranking Member Lamborn, Subcommittee members, it is my privilege to provide testimony about the implementation of housing reforms for privatized military family housing. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Al Aycock. I'm a military partnership executive with Corvis, as well as a retired Major General, having served more than 37 years on active duty with the United States Army. I'm directly and personally familiar with the military housing privatization initiatives. My family and I have lived in on-post housing managed by the Army and in multiple homes managed by 3 different MHPI private partners. 12 of my last 13 years of service focused on leading and operating Army installations from garrison level to the Pentagon, taking care of service members and their families. I've joined Corvis in May of 2019 because I'm strongly compelled to ensure the highest standards of customer service are provided to our service members and families. I can attest that Corvis and Corvis Property Management share this commitment as we serve more than 84,000 residents across 13 installations. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the progress that's been made, the results, and the ways in which we, in partnership with the services, continue to support our service members and families. I'll focus these comments on the support of the Tenant Bill of Rights and the emphasis on customer service. We actively advocated for the development of the Tenant Bill of Rights. We worked closely with the Department of Defense and the services on the specific wording and quickly agreed on the way ahead. We have been issuing our 7-year maintenance history reports to our current and prospective residents at all our installations since last December. We will work closely with the Department of Defense and the services to participate in their informal dispute resolution process at the garrison level through the military housing offices, as well as the formal process, the higher installation command. We agree with the wording of the common lease template, and we have worked with the Department of Defense to ensure the new leases will meet federal and state requirements. Importantly, Corvis continues to upgrade and replace aging housing and infrastructure with over $525 million invested over the last 2 years, $325 million in private funding and $200 million from reinvestment funds. This increases the more than 17,000 homes we've renovated and the more than 9,500 homes built. We are listening to our residents, and we provide multiple opportunities for residents to tell us how we're doing. This includes third-party surveys. Last month, Corvis Property Management received a national award from Satisfax for resident satisfaction based directly on resident input. We are analyzing those results in depth to ensure we continue this success and also to determine the areas where we can improve. Together with our service partners, we make ourselves available to residents through regular communication, including town halls, so that we can handle any issues brought forward. We have maintained close communication with the leaders in the Department of Defense and the services, from the Pentagon through the chain of command to the installation level, to ensure transparent and fully accountable working relationships. We share this same information with a number of congressional offices on a regular basis. In addition to our emphasis on preventative maintenance and future improvements at all our locations, we have responded to multiple natural disasters, hurricanes, heavy rains, unseasonably cold winter storms, with an emphasis on ensuring the safety and standard of living for each of our residents. We have brought on the additional staff to handle these issues while also ensuring a close working relationship with the installation leadership in our response. I am here today because this mission to support our service members and their families is deeply personal. I look forward to answering your questions and engaging in dialogue on the way forward in serving our service members and military families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Lendlease and Carolyn Tregarthen.
Thank you. Chairwoman Spear, Chairman Garamendi, Ranking Member Banks, Ranking Member Lambourne, and distinguished members. My name is Carolyn Tregarthen. I'm the Managing Director of Lendlease America's Communities business and have direct oversight for all Lendlease work with the US Department of Defense. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today. Lendlease has the privilege of managing approximately 40,000 single-family homes and approximately 200 apartments across 28 installations in 12 states. Over 123,000 military personnel and dependents call a Lendlease community home. Distinguished chairs and ranking members, you should be proud of your role in reforming and improving military housing and the FY20 NDAA. This bill included many critical provisions. Perhaps the most important of these is the Tenant Bill of Rights, which includes a dispute resolution procedure to ensure residents' grievances are solved fairly and with finality. I would note that Lendlease was one of the first to agree to every provision in the Tenant Bill of Rights, and we were the first to provide 7-year history of the home to all prospective tenants. We have reviewed all aspects of our customer service, resident engagement, and operational activities. We reached out to our residents and appreciate their feedback. We consulted with advocacy groups such as the Safe Military Housing Initiative, and we worked extensively with our various military partners to review all aspects of our operation. We've made broad-ranging improvements, including more frequent inspections by Lendlease and our military partners, more property management services performed by more highly trained personnel, and more options for our residents to communicate with us, including online and via our smartphone app. With that backdrop, I would like to address some of the concerns you heard from current or former residents at Fort Hood. We are aware that certain families are not satisfied, and that concerns me very much. Let me be clear, Fort Hood is a top priority for me personally and for every member of my team. We take all feedback seriously, and we also believe that the issues of a few do not represent the experience of the vast majority who live in a Lendlease community. To date, across our portfolio, Lendlease has invested more than $7.4 billion to build over 15,000 new homes and renovate more than 25,000 existing homes. As many of you know, with the Army, we recently announced a new private financing that will bring an additional $1.1 billion to make further housing improvements across several installations in our portfolio. We expect that nearly half of these new funds will be used at Fort Hood, with the remaining funds to be spent at Fort Campbell, Fort Wainwright, Fort Drum, Fort Knox, and our Army installations in Hawaii. This has always been part of our improvement strategy across all bases to ensure that we're or replacing older homes. This new private capital will expedite the renovation of more than 12,000 existing homes and construction of more than 1,200 new homes across these communities. As part of our efforts to better manage the issues related to older homes and improve the housing experience for our residents, we have instituted environmental plans at each installation, including Fort Hood, which include the following: enhanced lead-based paint inspections, new mold inhibiting paint and primer, utilisation of enhanced HVAC filters, expanding our change of occupancy maintenance and improvement program, including inspections by our military partner, improved moisture testing to pinpoint the source of moisture in any home. I recently travelled to Fort Hood and met with the leadership of the Fort Hood Resident Advisory Board and the 3-Corps Command Group. The 11 members of the Fort Hood Resident Advisory Board, who were chosen by their neighbours to represent them, continue to give us invaluable feedback and will guide us as we work together to improve housing on the installation. We recognise that despite these positive advancements, not everyone will be satisfied. As is their right, A small number of families have chosen litigation rather than working with us through the dispute resolution process, which is part of the Tenant Bill of Rights. If our residents have any concerns, there are many options available to them. We would prefer to work directly with our residents to resolve their concerns, as we do on a daily basis. We do not want to be litigants in a courtroom against our own customers. We are eager to be partners, working together to solve problems. Lendlease shares this committee's steadfast commitment to our military families. We have over 1,600 team members across our portfolio working each day to provide the best service possible. Our goals and yours remain the same. We both want our military families to have a first-rate housing experience. They expect as much and they deserve no less. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Yeah, about the mute button, it's my turn to also listen to myself. We now turn to Mr. Taylor, President, Facility Operations, Renovations, Constructions for Balfour Beatty.
I'm here, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Garamendi, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Lambourne, Ranking Member Banks, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Rick Taylor, as you heard, President of Facility Operations, Renovations, and Construction for Balfour Beatty Communities, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. As I've indicated in previous testimony, Balfour Beatty Communities takes the responsibility of serving those who serve our country very seriously. Over the past 2 years, we have heard your concerns and those of our residents loud and clear, and we've taken considerable action to improve the residential living experience for our military residents. Today, I'd like to provide you with an update on the status of our MHPI projects and highlight our shared commitment to supporting the safety, health, and well-being of our service members and the families that we serve. First, Balfour Beatty Communities is fully committed to implementing the housing reforms that were included in the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. Regarding the Tenant Bill of Rights, we are working closely with the military services toward implementing the outstanding rights and completing the actions necessary to administer those rights within our project legal documents. We have already initiated the 7-year maintenance history process at a number of our sites through a pilot program until the universal lease is fully implemented, and we'll continue to roll that out as we approach that date. Second, we have made significant investments to improve our maintenance services and our operations, strengthen quality assurance and compliance, and develop enhanced environmental related policies and procedures, including those for mold and moisture issues, to deliver the highest level of responsive customer service to residents. My statements are backed up by both our own metrics and customer satisfaction scores. During COVID, our staff worked every day to provide uninterrupted service to our residents. We instituted robust safety protocols to limit any possible exposure to the virus and worked hard to accommodate military members disrupted by COVID. We often extended leases or short-term leases for those that lost housing in the community. During the recent extreme weather in Texas, Oklahoma, and the surrounding area, our teams worked diligently on pre-storm preparations, worked around the clock to respond to heating and plumbing issues, accommodated impacted families in alternative lodging, and rapidly deployed our national restoration and repair resources. We were able to quickly resolve issues across numerous bases while maintaining quality and kept residents and installation command regularly briefed on our efforts and the progress we were making throughout. Third, we are doing our part to create more resilient, sustainable communities in concert with the Department of Defense's energy security goals. We are leveraging the latest technologies to reduce energy costs and improve energy resilience of domestic military installations. We have more than 39 megawatts of solar across our military housing portfolio, offsetting on average 25% of each community's energy consumption. We're installing upgraded energy efficient appliances and systems, including hot water heaters, furnaces, air conditioning units, lighting, and plumbing fixtures. We're also leveraging energy savings performance contracts at some of our sites. Most recently, at Fort Eustis and Fort Story in Virginia, we are projecting savings of at least $12.2 million and making energy efficiency improvements to over 1,000 homes. These savings are invested right back into the housing project for making other needed housing and community improvements. Lastly, I want to briefly mention the financials for these projects. In some cases, especially the case for older legacy units that were not programmed for replacement up to this point, the revenue stream is often inadequate to fund the needed improvements. One of the most significant challenges we face is the uncertainty of basic allowance for housing rates. Other challenges stem from aging infrastructure and utilities, sometimes owned by DoD or a third-party utility provider. We are not, however, waiting for others to address these issues. We are evaluating a wide variety of alternative financing options and collaborating with the services to find new and innovative ways to generate funding for needed replacements and renovations. These improvements to homes and communities will help ensure the long-term viability of this important program. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I will now turn to questions. I have one question for Mr. Aycock, former Major General. Mr. Aycock, is the base commander responsible for the well-being of all the personnel on the base, families, enlisted officers?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Can we then use the base commander as the individual responsible for the housing issues?
Sir, yes, I believe that the Chief of Staff of the Army said that very well in his testimony in an earlier time.
It seems to me we've heard testimony today that there are some base commanders that do not understand their responsibility. We intend to take that up in the upcoming NDAA. All right, I'd like now to yield the remaining time that I have, which is 5 minutes, to Ms. Luria.
Well, thank you, Chairman Garamendi and Chairwoman Spear for hosting this joint hearing, and to our witnesses for appearing today and for yielding me this time. I wanted to address my questions to Mr. Taylor. Balfour Beatty has several housing communities in the Hampton Roads area, including the two you already mentioned near Fort Eustis, Fort Story, and then also near Joint Base Little Creek, Fort Story. And so I just wanted to talk to you because, we frequently hear from those residents who are not pleased with their situation in housing, and you've described different efforts as well as the efforts that were implemented within the NDAA last year to try to improve some of those processes. But as a company, what steps are you taking to improve and earn back the trust of those residents in the communities with these processes and make them feel comfortable and safe in their homes?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. I think if you refer to earlier testimony, I was before this subcommittee about a year and a half ago, almost now. And at the time, we were undertaking a really thorough review of all of our internal operations. We were asked in response to an Air Force request to put together a performance improvement plan that really allowed for us to look, internally in our organization at everything that we were doing. We undertook significant changes, including a significant reorganization. We enhanced our training programs. We looked at ways of addressing some of the systemic issues that the industry was facing. We certainly weren't immune to that. We brought on a lot more internal resources to address a lot of the environmental concerns that were being discussed by residents and their services alike. We engaged a lot of across the board professional service providers to help us diagnose issues, why they were occurring, and engaging professional firms to help us with restoration efforts where those were necessary. One of the key things that we did as an organization was, if you think about the most complex system in any of our homes, it's the HVAC systems. And,
I saw in your testimony that you have used a single contractor throughout all of your properties.
Yes, ma'am.
To try to fix that. Since we have limited time, I appreciate you sharing the internal processes that you've implemented to try to improve quality of life in the housing units that you manage. And I was curious about what barriers you have. I mean, are there any institutional barriers, any things within the law, or the contracts under which you currently operate that prevent you from providing the best quality housing? And before you answer, just anecdotally, something I've heard from multiple housing units around the Hampton Roads area from their management, not just Balfour Beatty, but others, is really a challenge to find a qualified maintenance workforce to actually maintain these properties. So is there anything that can be done there? We are always looking for opportunities for veterans to have good quality employment when they leave the service. I know that we have technical schools and community colleges in our area that specifically have training programs for building maintenance. Is there anything that can be done to tie this all together? Because you can't go fix the houses if you really are struggling just to find a workforce to do that. So do you have any comments on anything that we could do to help on that front?
Yeah, sure. I'll address your first issue. In terms, are there any legal impediments to us doing the right thing? Absolutely not. And we're not constrained by anything of that nature. I think you raise an interesting point in terms of our ability to attract and retain quality workforce, because that's our lifeblood, and that's one of the reasons why we employed this third-party national contractor to assist us with the most complex system in our units. That's allowed for us to free up our workforce to address all the other issues. One of the other important things that we did this past year that we just embedded in the organization at the beginning of this year was we looked at the level of turnover that we see in our blue-collar workforce, and it was alarming. And I'm certain that all of the project owners are, face a lot of the same issues. So, important for us is trying to stem the flowing tide of folks that leave us. So we instituted a new way we call it a maintenance tech job family. And what it does is it has various steps within the organization and allows for them to grow as their qualifications and certifications grow as well. That will help to ensure that our maintenance workforce see a path for growth within the organization. If they're willing to invest, we're willing to invest in them to improve their skill set, then they can rise up the ladder. That's a new change that we instituted that we're confident are going to yield the results that we want to create more stability. It's hard to run an organization if you have constant turnover. So, we're doing our best in finding creative ways to stem the outflow of our
thank you
staff.
very much for your testimony.
Okay, well, thank you for the insight into this issue, and my time has expired, so I yield back.
Ms. Lurie, your time has expired. Thank you so very much. I'm now going to turn to Mr. Lambourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for having this hearing. Mr. Taylor of Balfour Beatty Companies, Fort Carson is located in my district, and it's the home to over 25,000 military service members, as well as their families. Back in 2018 and 19, Fort Carson Family Homes was subject to the same concerns about substandard living conditions we heard about with privatized housing throughout the country. Since that time, how have you worked with your Army partners to implement the reforms and requirements of the past two NDAAs, and what initiatives has Balfour undertaken to improve maintenance responsiveness, ensure that service members are receiving the information they need, and having issues promptly resolved to their satisfaction?
Congressman, thanks for the question. I think in terms of what we've done to improve the relationship at the installation, certainly the Army has put a keen focus on this, ensuring that there is very active engagement from the garrison commander on down regarding housing issues. We enjoy a very close-knit relationship there. I say close-knit in terms of we're rowing in the same direction, ensuring that we're keeping first and foremost the quality of life of our residents, the responsiveness that is necessary for us to meet the needs of our residents. We've adopted a lot of technological advancements that make it much easier for our residents to communicate issues with us. They have access to our online portal. They have an app that is at their fingertips that allows for them to communicate regularly, with our staff if they've got an issue. That online portal allows for them to track, their maintenance issue from cradle to grave. They get frequent updates if it changes the status. One of the other things that I heard one of the other individuals mention was the satisfaction scores, and we've seen increasing satisfaction scores. Those are conducted by a third-party company that give us that feedback, but we're only capturing a very small percentage of residents because Generally, if we're in a resident's home doing their work, we generally are only capturing 15 to 20% of those residents. What we moved to this past year was another way to ascertain whether or not a resident is satisfied with the quality of work. So we moved to something we call key texting. Anytime we complete, in our minds, the work order that the resident required, they automatically get a system-generated text message asking them regarding their satisfaction with the work performed. It's a very binary response. They either text Y for yes if they're satisfied, N for no if they're not. Any N's we can immediately follow up to find out what we need to do to rectify their situation. I share with you the concerns about some of the older housing stock at Fort Carson, and I can tell you that that is first and foremost on our minds. We've been working in close coordination with the Army for the past several months to look at ways to identify additional funding so that we can address the legacy issues that are really causing us a lot of concern. Bear in mind, a lot of those aging housing units are sitting on very old aging infrastructure that further complicate issues for us, and that's certainly an area that I think Congress could lend a hand in identifying additional funding to address some of the systemic underlying infrastructure needs of the installation.
Now, along those lines, Mr. Taylor, your company announced $400 million to recapitalize housing projects that you've obtained and are able to invest. Will that include any units at Fort Carson, or is it for other parts of the country?
Well, sir, I don't know that, I don't believe we made a public announcement of that. I can tell you that, Fort Carson, in addition to many of our installations, we're working in close coordination with military leadership to identify opportunities for us to either refinance or recapitalize the funding streams that exist inside of the projects. With regard to Fort Carson, we're pretty far down the road with the Army, and we hope to be in a position to be able to announce something very soon. It's too early for me to make an official comment on that, but certainly as that develops, we'd be happy to come in and brief you on the status of that effort.
Okay, yeah, please keep me and my office informed on that issue. My notes said a little differently, but maybe we're jumping the gun or assuming something, but I await your announcement. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing again, and back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambourne. I now turn to Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for participating again. I'm going to have a series of questions that I would like each of you to answer, and we'll start with you, Major General Icott, then to Ms. Tregarthen, and then to Mr. Taylor. Are you privately held companies?
Yes, ma'am, we are a privately held company.
We are a public company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange.
Mr. Taylor.
And we are publicly traded in the UK.
What percentage of your revenues are ascribed to overhead? General?
So, ma'am, I believe that I'll have to get back with you about the exact percentage that are ascribed to overhead, but we're a very small company and the overhead is extremely small at the headquarters level. To give you a precise answer, I'd like to get back with you on with your staff.
That's fine. How many employees do you have?
So, ma'am, we have it broken down into a grouping of each individual garrison has a separate grouping of folks. They're in separate LLCs, and within the headquarters, we're still a very small company. And again, I can give you the precise numbers across the entire board.
All right, so you'll provide us the number of employees at each of the garrisons and also your overhead as compared to your revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Absolutely.
Ms. Tregarthen?
Congresswoman, I don't have that information to hand today, but I'm very happy to follow up with that and provide it to the committee in writing.
All right, we appreciate that. And Mr. Taylor?
Unfortunately, ma'am, same for me. I think I'd rather than give you a misleading number, we'd be happy to follow up for the record.
All right.
In terms of number of employees, our military housing division employs a little over 1,200 employees nationwide.
Okay. And Mr. Garthen, do you have the number of employees?
Congresswoman, we have approximately 1,600 employees working across our military housing portfolio.
All right. Do each of you recognize your responsibility to comply with state and local laws concerning habitability of housing? Mr. General Aycock?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Ms. Treff-Garthen?
Yes, Congresswoman, we do.
Mr. Taylor?
Likewise, ma'am. And I would just offer up that we, and I think other project owners, recently responded to an inquiry from Senators Warren and Tillis, and we have a more fulsome response around our approach to these issues, and we'd be happy to submit it for the record to the committee.
Well, regardless of your fulsome explanation, the truth of the matter is that you are, in fact, responsible to complying with the laws of cities and states as it relates to your housing conditions. And it's my understanding through talking with some of the advocates that some of your employees like to hide behind some argument that somehow local laws do not apply, which is a falsehood. Okay, you may not be able to answer this as well, so if you would provide this to the committees when you provide the other answers. How many of your homes are offline at each of your installations during a 6-month period of time? How many of your families move before the lease is up? Do each of you pay for damaged personal property when a unit becomes uninhabitable? Mr. General Aycock?
So, ma'am, I'll start with the offline. That's a flexing number, and we will give you an average of a 6-month timeline that will tell you about how many houses we have offline. That's also not just affected by an environmental condition, sometimes affected by the renovations on those posts. So we'll try to set that so that it's very clear when we provide that. And in terms of damages, if there is something that happened as a housing condition and we go through the process with the tenant and it is our fault, yes, the answer is yes, we will make sure that that is taken care of.
Ms. Tregarthen?
So, Congresswoman, we will provide the information in terms of units online, units vacant, etc. That is something we track on a very regular basis, so we'll provide that to you, to the committee in writing. And in terms of damaged household goods, again, if the damage is due to a condition in the house, then yes, we do pay for those goods.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. My responses would be identical to the prior two.
All right, Mr. Taylor, following the 2019 revelation that some of your projects were falsifying maintenance records, what steps have your company taken to hold those responsible accountable?
As I previously testified, Congresswoman, we are actively still involved in discussions with the Department of Justice. I can assure you that we're making progress there, and we've provided regular updates to the professional staff of Chairman Garamendi's committee in terms of how that's progressing. Unfortunately, until they conclude their investigation, I'm not at liberty to discuss that issue.
All right, can you at least explain for those of us who may not have been aware of this before, how was it first uncovered that there was falsification of maintenance records?
We identified the issue, ma'am, and we undertook hiring a third-party law firm to help us investigate, and we took that issue forward to the Department of Justice and have been sharing our progress with our own internal investigation along the way.
All right, I thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concerns over environmental health exposures in some of these units have prompted NDAA's 2020 Section 3053, which requires DoD to establish a process to identify, record, and resolve environmental health hazards in housing. My question for all three of you, has the DoD provided any direction to you? And where in the process are you in implementing these reforms? I'll start with General Aycock.
Thank you, sir. That's a great question, and we concern ourselves every day with safe living conditions. That's the first thing that we have to do. As you know, we've gone through several natural disasters, so that sometimes introduces environmental effects around the house, and we take care of the families immediately when those pieces happen. We have our own internal processes. You asked me the specific question of has DoD provided us specific guidance? And while we are working with DoD on that, we have not yet been given the precise implementation of that directive.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tregarthen?
Thank you, Congressman. We also have been working with the services consistently since the FY20 NDAA to ensure that those measures are implemented appropriately.
Okay, and Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, likewise, Congressman, I can tell you that as I mentioned in my brief opening remarks, we've taken a lot of additional steps to enhance our own internal environmental staff so that we can provide good oversight and direction to our site teams. And we exclusively use third-party agencies to help us assess where those conditions exist, and then likewise engage expert third parties to help us with remediation efforts. It's a significant issue for the industry, and one that we certainly don't take lightly.
Thank you for that. I got to say, it's already been said, but I and the others who participate are very disappointed and surprised about what we heard in the last panel, in our first panel of housing advocates at various military installations. These families are relying on all of you, and they're relying on us as well to provide proper oversight. So I have a more general question for you. How do you believe that military families that you are serving measure your performance, and what are you doing to get better at listening to them? Tell us about your internal processes to improve the way that you listen to them. I'll start, General, with you.
So again, thank you. We are taking extra time to communicate with our residents. We make sure that we have folks in town halls who can be held accountable. They're transparent with what they can do. If there's an issue that comes up, they deal with the resident on the spot as quickly as possible. We have open communication through a number of surveys. When we move somebody in, we immediately ask them how well that process went, and we get graded on it. When somebody does a work order, we ask them to give us the same kind of feedback. When we move somebody out, we ask them for feedback at that particular time also. We maintain communication up and down the chain of command. Even going back to the initial question that Chairman Garamendi asked me, we have great relationships with the senior commanders and the garrison commanders on the Army installations, and the wing commanders and the mission support commanders on the Air Force installations. And when we have a problem, we work together as a team to make sure that the chain of command understands what the issue is, and then how we can work together to resolve it.
Ms. Tregarthen?
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for the question. We have a number of areas that we use to make sure that we are communicating and we have the right conversation with our residents. We think about the conversation. We think about before they choose to move on base, sign a lease, have maintenance experiences, and ultimately try and measure all those points through satisfaction surveys. When we do receive a satisfaction response, and I know those surveys are done, 4 of those points. We do receive responsibilities less frequently satisfied with contact with residents iPhone who are to understand what the issue was. Additionally, we have established resident advisors at all of our those resident advisory boards are made up of residents who are elected, nominated by their fellow residents. We then meet with them on a regular basis. That helps us to the communication line into our resident community. Additionally, we have the CL surveys which are conducted by to understand exactly the difference between those CL surveys and our surveys that we do at each customer journey. The CL survey is done once a year. The status is done every time we interact. A combination of those allows us to get better communication, better messaging, better information to understand what is going on and what our residents are thinking, feeling, and what they would like to influence about the installation that they live on.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Congressman, very similar response, but surveys are certainly of great use. Satisfax, I think, is a great tool. As I mentioned, unfortunately, we're only capturing generally 15 to 20% of our residents. So we've decided to move forward with our key texting program so that we can get broader coverage, so that we get more instantaneous feedback from our residents. That's been extremely successful. Whereas Satisfax may only be capturing 15-20% of residents, we're getting 70 to 80% response rates where we've rolled out the key texting. So we're encouraged by the fact that we're hearing more frequently from residents in terms of their satisfaction. We, like others, we encourage our site team members to make warm calls. It doesn't have to be in response to a work order. Just trying to stay in touch with what our residents want, desire, what their needs are. So there's a lot of that happens. We engage in frequent town halls with our installation command leadership and our housing partners. And that's been a really useful forum for us to hear at the same time issues that residents are facing so that we can collectively address the issues time and again. We do utilize other forms of technology that gives us really instantaneous feedback on how we're tracking on these key performance metrics. We utilize a tool that we invested in last year that gives us clear visibility of what those scores look like and the comments that we hear from residents. Beyond that, if a resident is unsatisfied with any performance issue, there's a process by which they can go about having their issue addressed. First and foremost, they're encouraged to meet with one of our managers on the site. If their issue is not resolved, we invite them to submit a request through our what we call BB Cares hotline. I can tell you that reaches the corporate office. I see 100% of those issues that have not been resolved by our local leadership team, and to the extent that we can't still satisfy the residents' issues, then they have an outlet through their housing management offices as well. Anything that reaches their desk, we collectively engage to figure out what we need to do to resolve any issues.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. I'm going to call on Ms. Houlihan if she's still with us. There are votes going on, so it's possible that members will vote and return. Ms. Houlihan? Ms. Escobar, you're next then. 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and Madam Chair. I really just have a very simple question, and this is based on an idea that was floated by some of our advocates, and their stories, by the way, were just so heartbreaking. To each one of our panelists, can you tell me, so you have a lease with the federal government, and if so, how long is that lease?
So, ma'am, I'll start. There's a ground lease that all the military housing privatization initiative groups run. There may be some variation in that, but it's for the length of the partnership, and in most cases, it's going to probably be about 50 years. There's a key with that particular lease. It's actually operated through the Army Corps of Engineers, and there is a consistent check on that lease to make sure that the right land is being used for the right purpose. There's an accountability chain for that particular ground lease.
And Mr. Aycock, before I move on to the next panelist, how long into your lease are you?
That would depend on the property, ma'am. Each of the properties came online at different times, so each lease would be contingent upon the LLC that runs that particular installation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Congresswoman and I have a very similar answer, that our ground leases are 50 years, and we are approximately 20 years into each of those ground leases, but similar to the previous panelists, it does depend on the date when the project actually started.
Okay, thank you.
And a similar answer for me, ma'am. With respect to Fort Bliss, which I know sits in your district, we reached financial close on that project, I believe, in 2004. So that'll give you a sense of how far we are along in your backyard.
Okay, thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Ms. Price. Ms. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm curious, you talked just briefly about the length of these contracts. Why a 50-year contract?
So, ma'am, I'll start. This is Major Aycock, retired. It's the time it takes to do the financing of the actual redevelopment. The challenge that you had with the old system is you had appropriated funds, and the appropriated funds were just one year long. You really can't redevelop up front. And so the partners take some risk by going into an area and putting money into it early, and then they count on payback later on. So most of the organizations are going to reach a crossover time sometime about the halfway point of the actual ground lease. Would be common. It's not going to be the same at every place because each one has a different dynamic in terms of the income. But that's what it takes to get private investors to put their money into the program.
Follow up. Is there more than one developer in on a specific base? Are you signing these 50-year leases and you're the only provider on those bases?
So, ma'am, again, I will start that process. In general, yes, that is the common way that it was done. I'm not 100% familiar with all the other developments, but I don't know of one where there's more than one military housing privatization partner on those particular installations. There was actually a competition at these bases, and there were multiple partners who would provide a estimate to the team on the base, and the team on the base would pick the partner that they thought had the best overall bid.
Thank you for answering that. Congressman Spear mentioned earlier about municipalities or cities and counties having oversight. Who is reviewing the actual construction or renovation projects and approving the habitability of these particular homes? And maybe Rick or Carolyn may be able to speak to that.
Yes,
Carolyn, would you like to take it?
Sorry, Rick. Certainly. So, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. Oversight of any development work or building is subject to an independent construction consultant who is independently appointed and has oversight of both the design process and the construction process. And the services as our services partner are also part of that process.
And if I can follow up, who appoints that independent inspector?
We appoint that inspector in conjunction with the military service partner, so either the Army, the Air Force, or the Navy.
Mr. Taylor, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, same answer on that issue. I will say, in response to one of your earlier questions, is there any installation where we've got two project owners? The only one that I'm aware of is one that we're party to is Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, because that was awarded separately. The on-base housing was awarded earlier. They identified a deficit of housing, and so The second part of that was a project that we won that was combined with Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. If I could, I'd like to just kind of go back to your earlier question regarding the length of these ground leases and why 50 years. And I think it's kind of important to kind of reflect on what was the state of military housing when this initiative was started. OSD estimated it was going to take $30 billion plus or minus to restore housing. So that's why that was one of the motivations for the program. But turning to a private sector entity, what was important was to fix the amount of time at the right spot such that we could get long-term financing. That long-term financing enabled for us to go to the bond markets, the financing markets, and identify as much upfront cash as we could possibly get. The tenor of those agreements is what allowed for us to raise the amount of money that we did. It's no different than in simplistic terms. If we're buying a house, you're buying a house, I'm buying a house, you can afford more house on a 30-year mortgage than you can on a 15-year mortgage. So having the length of time in these ground leases enabled for us to really raise significant amounts of capital on the front end.
Okay. My time has expired. I want to thank you all for your willingness to participate in today's hearing, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Price. There are votes going on. I'm going to leave in a few moments, but I'll take one more. I think Mr. Johnson. Wait a minute. I'm going to pass the gavel to Ms. Jacobs, and she'll continue some questions. Ms. Spear will be back in a few moments, and I'll see how fast I can run the 300 yards. So, Ms. Jacobs, please continue. Our next witness will be Mr. Johnson.
Perfect. Mr. Johnson, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. General Aycock, thank you so much, and all of you for your testimony today. My district is home to Fort Polk and the Joint Readiness Training Center, and of course, Fort Polk is one of the installations serviced by your company. I'm curious if you could provide us with an update on where things currently stand on implementing all the provisions of the Tenant Bill of Rights, and include dispute resolution and rent segregation and the 7-year maintenance history.
Absolutely, sir. We have been a leader along with the other companies that are here in making sure that the Tenant Bill of Rights is on board. We support the dispute resolution process, and we will be a part of it, and that is where the rent sidebar comes in. That will be decided in that particular level. We are issuing our 7-year maintenance history in advance, and I believe the other companies are doing the same. That's where we're going. We have been working very carefully with the Department of Defense to make sure that the common lease template is up. We have said that was good. We're trying to help to make sure that the state and federal parts of that both work. So we are a full advocate behind that particular effort, sir.
I appreciate that and that diligence. As you know, the community there is deeply vested, and they're big supporters of the base and all of that. And everybody works together. Fort Polk Progress is one of the big groups that advocates, and I know you've interacted with all of them. So they're all watching it closely. We appreciate the progress. What are some of the challenges that you've come across in implementing some of those specific items?
Sir, we believe that there haven't been any real problems internal to our company about implementing all of this. John Pacern, our CEO, has completely done a relook at the entire company, and he's made sure that the right people are in the right places and has gotten on board with where we need to direct themselves. And so we are behind the Congress's directive and the DOD's implementation.
That's great. Shift gears just a little bit in my remaining time. Louisiana had a tough year, as I know you're probably aware. We got hit pretty hard with the pandemic, and then we had record hurricane season, and then we had this winter storm, kind of once in a lifetime event that just happened. We feel like Job in the Old Testament. We're just getting beat up all over. But I just wonder if there have been issues related to those weather events and the natural disasters, and how your company's been addressing those issues. Have you had big problems with that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have had the normal challenges and issues that anybody would have in dealing with 2 hurricanes and a major winter storm. I think the difference has been the positive attitude and the go get it done type approach that the garrison and the senior commander have taken. We had a large session at the end of October where we had a lot of people travel there, and we all sat down. Myself and Mr. Sims from my company sat down with General Doyle and his team to make sure that he was happy. We have created a common dashboard that tells him every day what's going on a day-by-day basis. We went and did initial triage and emergency repair. We did the assessment of non-emergency repairs. We're now in the scope and schedule development piece. And as you know, we have done all of the mitigations that we are required to do with none required left. We have got 728 of the homes required interior restructuring. We only have 3 in progress and only 14 remaining to reach completion. In terms of roof repairs, we're working hard on that. 2,652 roof repairs required. We got 187 in contract, 50 in progress, and 1,605 completed. We're going to go to the quality assurance piece as we walk along the way. And then after those 2 hurricanes came, we had this winter storm, and at Fort Polk, there were 215 homes affected. 56 of those were homes that had been previously damaged in the hurricanes. We had to take care of 16 families who got displaced temporarily, but we've been working on those. So we've got 123 mitigations required, 31 complete, 13 in progress, and the repair work goes on. And we are clasped at the hand with the garrison and senior commander.
That's a great update. I appreciate the details there. And General, I just want to thank you for your service and appreciate you being with us today. And I'll yield back.
Thank you. I will now yield myself 5 minutes for the purpose of questioning. My first question goes to all of you. Do you agree that military families should be treated as paying customers while living in your military housing facilities since they give up their BAH in order to utilize this military housing?
So ma'am, we treat our residents as though they are ours. They're the folks who came to us and asked to live in our houses. They had other choices to go to, and so we treat them as we would treat a resident anywhere else in the portfolio. We try to take care of the military families and their soldiers.
Congresswoman, I think we all agree that our military families expect and deserve quality housing, and we're firm on our commitment to provide that for them. We strive to continuously improve so that the military families are provided with that level of housing that they expect and deserve. And one of the things that's extremely important to us is working with our families as partners to make sure that they are getting what they need and we are there hand in hand with them to deliver what they expect.
And I'll just add, we certainly understand that our military residents have a choice, and we want to be their housing option of choice. And so, you know, it's quite disappointing to any of us in our organization. I'm sure I speak for everyone that if we find that we've lost the trust of our residents because we're not addressing their daily needs, then we ought to be held to account and make sure that, you know, we figure out what we need to do to improve. We have great admiration for the sacrifices that our service members and their families make, and they shouldn't suffer from substandard housing. So it's down to us to make sure that we're providing first-class service, and where we fall short, it's down to us to make sure that we diagnose why and where we need to improve. We do that in close collaboration, I can tell you, with our service partners, more so today than ever in the history of this program, and I think that's a benefit that's going to pay dividends long term.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad we all share the sentiment because I just want to share with you some of the complaints that I've heard from my constituents very recently. So I recently heard from one family where the military spouse was pregnant and their home suffered severe water damage, resulting in the ceiling collapsing into the kitchen, all because maintenance had not been kept up on this home. Another constituent said that when mold was found, instead of fixing the problem, it was painted over. Another family was forced to live with black mold in the ventilators for weeks while they waited for a response. I've also heard from an active military member who has seen 4 of his neighbors' cars stolen because of the lack of security, and others who have old and outdated refrigerators that are too small to support their families. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you that old appliances mean they have higher costs for energy and electricity. I was wondering if you could speak to what you're specifically doing to prevent these kinds of issues from occurring, and if you could talk about why it's taken so long to implement many of these reforms that have already been discussed today.
So, ma'am, I'll step in. We take every complaint and every issue that a resident may have seriously. We have multiple ways for those issues to be communicated to us. We have checks that go in behind and make sure that quality control is done on work orders. Each time that we have a resident contact, we try to make that a positive effort to ensure that the resident has what they need, what they deserve, and what we should provide.
Thank you, Major General Aycock. Ms. Tregarthen?
Congresswoman, thank you for your question. And obviously, I can't comment on the specific cases that you've listed, but let me talk about some of the things we do with our residents. So if I start from our change of occupancy process, when a resident moves out of a house, before we make that home available to our next resident, we do maintenance on it as required. And that may include replacing appliances, it may include painting, it may include a number of things. That home is then inspected by our property managers. It is then, we have a follow-up inspection by our military partner. And after the home passes those 2 inspections and is said to be ready for a resident to move into, it is made available to a prospective resident to inspect before they sign a lease. When that resident does sign a lease and move into that home, we then do an orientation with that resident of that home. And that includes things like, how does the HVAC work? How do you change your filters? Where is the exhaust fan in the bathroom, to make sure that the resident understands the home. We're also very, very clear in making sure they understand how to contact us if they have any issues. And that may be via a phone number, it may be via an app, it may be via our portal, or it may be via their local resident advisory board member. Additionally, we provide that resident with a resident guide, which outlines a lot of the information they will have been told, both on their orientation, but also more broadly how to contact us, how different things work. So we try and make sure that when that resident moves into that home, they do understand, firstly, the home, how everything works, and also how to contact us should they have any questions or follow-ups.
Thank you.
We then...
Sorry, I appreciate all of your work. My time has expired. I'll now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Jackson. I think you might be muted.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you to the people that are testifying today for being here today. The Military Housing Privatization Initiative was created in 1996. That was actually while I was on active duty in the United States Navy. Congress started this initiative because the Department of Defense does not need to be in the business of housing, which I agree with, and we can utilize our private sector partners to provide service members and their families with suitable living conditions. In 2018, it came to light that military families were experiencing issues with their homes. Much of that I listened to today and I'm sympathetic to. Subsequently, my colleagues in both the House and the Senate held a series of hearings and briefings that passed new guidance to raise the standards for the quality of housing for our service members' experience. Everything I've heard about privatized housing over the last few years has been negative for the most part, I will say that. But today I want to talk about at least one good news story based on my brief time in Congress, which happened in my home district of Shepherd Air Force Base. The installation commander, General Bell, has already been a great teammate for me. He's taken me out, he showed me all over the base. He's gone into lots of detail about the housing issue. He and his team have operated with their private partner to provide the airmen there with what appears to me to be really good conditions. By no means has Shepherd been perfect. We talked about a lot of the problems there, but they are trending in the right direction and they are working hard to make things better. I think that we should give credit to General Bell and to his leadership at Shepherd Air Force Base in particular, and I think that's a big part of the solution here. Mr. Taylor, I wanted to thank you and all of your witnesses for appearing before this committee today and for the transparency you provided to me and my staff on privatized military housing. I just wanted to point out that in my opinion, a partnership only works if both parties are involved and willing to work together. Shepherd Air Force Base, I think, is an example of how an installation commander and private company can and should work together hand in hand to provide the best possible housing and the best possible services to our service members who have earned that. From everything I've seen and heard from General Bell and from Balfour Beatty, they've worked together to solve a lot of these problems and to engage the community. Mr. Taylor, I just wanted to know if you could speak to what has been done at Shepherd Air Force Base to foster this strong relationship between the leadership in your company and the community, and where could we improve this, and how can this others use this example?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, and really appreciate the kind remarks. We do have a very good team on the ground there that we're extremely proud of. There have been some bumps in the road, but we've been working through issues of the past together with our military partners, and it's just testament to the good things that can happen when we align our interests and focus our energies in the right areas. With respect to how are we able to get there at Shepherd, it's not unique to Shepherd. I'm confident to say that this is really the outcome of the significant efforts that we've put forward over the last 2 years to really look hard at the way that we're running our business. There are many things that I mentioned a performance improvement plan in the past. There are so many elements of our business that are embedded in that really have been transformative in the way that we're approaching our business. It's and so the fruits of that labor are really starting to show with your own personal experiences and what you're hearing at Shepherd. So we're proud of that effort. We're not there yet. We know that we still have room to improve, but clearly, based upon the key performance metrics that we're tracking, I can confidently say we're tracking in the right direction. We still have room to improve, but thankfully, with the dedication of our teammates and the outreach and support that we're getting from installation commanders, it yields the type of result that you just described. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I'll be the first to say some of the stories we heard today are truly horrifying, and we have to fix these problems. But I will say, I just wanted to point out, at least from my brief experience, that I think there are a few areas around, like the one I cited, where we are moving in the right direction when it comes to housing. And I'm really looking forward to working with my colleagues here on the Armed Services Committee to make sure that we stay on the right track and we do the right thing and take care of our service members. So with that, thank you, Chair, and I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. And with that, I will pass the gavel back to Chairman Garamendi.
And you'll also tell me where we are in the order. Ms. Spear, it's your turn.
Mr. Chairman, I will yield and refrain from asking my questions till the end if other members would like to go ahead.
Okay. I believe that everybody that is still with the committee on the screen, I think they've all asked questions, so we can do one more round of questions here if those that are still with us. I see Ms. Escobar is still here. Are there other members that want to ask another round of questions? Ms. Spear, if you have another round, and then I'll take my turn and we'll wrap this thing up.
Okay. Thank you again all for being here. It's been a little truncated because we've had votes on the floor, so I apologize for being in and out. I'd like to ask you, have you ever not received incentive pay at one of your installations? And we'll just go down the list. General Aycock?
Yes, ma'am. There has been occasions where that was reduced.
Reduced or just withheld until you complied with the requirements?
There wasn't a initial requirement to comply with a requirement. There was a case that happened immediately right after the 2019 issues happened where senior commanders decided that it was the right thing to do in their part to withhold. And so we have had that happen to us, yes.
And so what percentage was withheld?
Ma'am, I'll have to get back with you on the precise places and amounts that was in.
All right, so you will respond to the committee by providing us where the locations were and what the percentage was. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the amount, if you will. Okay. Ms. Trefgarthen, I'm sorry if I've been slaughtering your name.
No, Congresswoman Spear, you are pronounced. It's very well pronounced. Thank you. We have had situations on different installations where our incentive pay has been not awarded at 50%, so reduced. And similar to the previous witness, I can commit to provide you that detailed information in writing after the hearing.
And Mr. Taylor?
Likewise, Congressman, we've had many instances where the incentive fees have been reduced, not earning the full potential. One of the things that I know that all of us in the industry are working closely with the services on is revised metrics to make sure that they are more appropriate for the environment that we're in, and I know that we and Corvis and Lendlease are in lockstep with adopting what those revised metrics look like.
And it's my understanding that this decision-making is exclusively with the commander at the installation. Is that correct? So that's what you lobby if you're trying to negotiate the incentive?
The incentive metrics are being negotiated at headquarters for each of the service branches, and they look quite similar. I will say that the installation commander has a role in recommendations in terms of what the level of incentive fees that ought to be received, but ultimately they need to go to higher headquarters for ultimate adjudication.
Is that your understanding, each of you? You can just nod your heads if you. All right. One of you had referenced having a town hall with the officers at a particular installation, which I found curious because it would make sense to me that you should have town halls with the residents of your various homes that you have on this facility. So I guess my question to each of you is, will you commit to having a town hall in the next year with at each of your installations and be present for it? You can do it by.
Ma'am, this is General Aycock. The town halls are orchestrated by the installation and senior commander, and we participate in those. If there was any reference meant to officers, it meant those two are the ones who actually run the town hall and make sure that it goes the right way, because those are their people on there and we support them. So we make sure that there's always somebody there from our company who can answer questions and take responsibility for anything that a resident would bring to them.
So I guess I'm asking a very specific question. Would you commit to participating in a town hall at each of your installations via Zoom?
So yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, we have already committed to it. I'm sorry.
I want you to. I'm not talking about persons under your control. I want to know if you will commit to participating in a town hall with residents at each of your installations.
If you're asking me specifically, yes, ma'am. I will commit to attending a town hall at the installations that we have on underneath the Corvis partnership with the military.
All right, thank you. Ms. Trifgarthen?
Congresswoman, yes, I will commit to attending town halls at our installations, and I would note that we do already hold regular town halls where all residents are welcome. I would also add that with our resident advisory boards, I have been, as I'm able to visit different installations given COVID travel restrictions, I have actually been meeting with our resident advisory board members as well. So, but I will absolutely commit to continue doing that and to attending the town halls.
All right, but not just with your advisory board. I want to make it sure it's open to the residents. All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Absolutely.
As will I, ma'am. As was stated, we're already conducting town halls typically on a quarterly basis at nearly all of our installations. So there's a lot of dialogue. But for me personally, I'm be delighted to participate. I can tell you that over the past year since I've been in the seat, we certainly have had a lot of travel restrictions that have prevented a lot of personal interaction.
All right, I have one last question, Mr. Chairman. The Bill of Rights for tenants, my understanding is that you will be compliant with that by June or July of this year. Is that correct? General Aycock?
Yes, ma'am. We are on track with all of the Department of Defense suspenses for the final parts that are involved with the Tenant Bill of Rights.
So all of them.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Ms. Trefgarthen.
Congresswoman, we have implemented a number of the requirements of the Tenants Bill of Rights, and we are on track to have the final pieces in place before the summer PCS season.
Including the history of previous tenants?
Congresswoman, we have been providing the 7-year history of maintenance to our residents since summer 2020, and we have in fact provided over 11,000 histories to prospective residents, and we have only had 16 residents choose to take a different home with us.
All right. Even at Fort Hood?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, there are a lot of concerns at Fort Hood, so I'm surprised to hear that. I intend to return to Fort Hood, so maybe we can plan a town hall that you can be available for when I go. All right, Mr. Taylor.
Congressman, we are likewise tracking according to OSD's stated timeline by summer PCS season.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. We have 2 additional members still with us, Ms. Jacobs and Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, do you have another question? If you do, you're going to have to hit your mute button. I'll give you a chance to get your mute button. In the meantime, we will move on. Mr. Johnson? Okay. Apparently, no further questions. I see Mr. Jackson and Ms. Bryce, you're both with us. You've come back from voting. We started a second round of questions. Mr. Jackson? Ms. Bryce? This is one of the things about the hybrid hearings.
I'm happy, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to yield to my freshman colleague from Texas, Mr. Jackson, if he wishes to go first in asking additional follow-up questions.
That's very kind of you, Mr. Jackson.
I don't think Mr. Jackson can hear us, though.
Your turn, Ms. Bryce.
Thank you so much. Mr. Taylor, as you know, I represent the Oklahoma City metro area, and Tinker Air Force Base is just outside of my congressional district. But I did serve as an honorary commander at Tinker Air Force Base during my time in the Oklahoma State Senate, so I got to know the base well. It is my understanding that you've put significant efforts into righting this ship as far as these issues that we've discussed tonight go. But my question is, at one point you had occupancy rates as high as 95%, and they've fallen and that was in 2019, but they've fallen to as low as 70%. What are you doing to address this issue and build confidence in our service members that they can count on your organization and the others on the call that they're going to receive quality housing from your entities?
Yes, ma'am. And great question. And if you look at what the historical occupancy had been at Tinker prior to us having a lot of systemic issues with broken water lines that led to a lot of the environmental concerns that received a lot of attention. We've remediated those issues. I can tell you that we are slowly building back the trust of Tinker residents. We're working in lockstep with the wing commander and his staff. We've done a lot to really kind of turn the corner there. I can tell you that we're somewhat the victim of a lack of a PCS season over this past year because of the global pandemic, but we've been slowly growing occupancy. All indications are from Air Force leadership that we're going to see a really robust PCS season. And so I think all of the controls that we've put in place, the differences in the way that we're managing that installations housing like I said, in close coordination with our military housing partner, I think is putting us in a much better position. We track really closely what resident satisfaction rates look like, both on move-in and on work order performance. And we track it through, a unique tool called Power BI that gives us instantaneous look at how, whether or not those scores are trending in the right direction or not. I can tell you today that Tinker Air Force Base is on both of those accounts, among the highest in our entire inventory, which I think has been a significant sea change in terms of where we were 2 years ago versus today.
Mr. Taylor, let me interject here for just a moment, though. You mentioned earlier this particular platform that you're utilizing to text and get, feedback information from the residents. And while I think that's incredibly important, I get the impression that it's either a yes or no answer. And if it's a yes answer, you're giving them, you're giving yourself a 5-star. There's no yes, but this is still happening, or yes, but I still have additional concerns. So I want to be clear, having a background in marketing and data, that we're looking at all the data correctly to ensure that every issue for these residents is being addressed.
Right, ma'am. Yeah, maybe I misspoke, but those text messages that we're sending is just validation for the residents that don't complete a resident satisfaction survey through Satisfax. So the raw data is the third-party survey that gets sent to the resident. So we're not taking any credit for those yes answers being a 5. That's only affirmation for us that the resident is satisfied, whether or not they chose to fill out that Satisfax survey.
Great.
Ms. Bice, we are running out of time. We're going to lose connectivity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you so very much for your question. Ms. Spear, you had one more question.
Actually, it's just a clarification. I wanted to make sure that you are going to be complying with the Tenant Bill of Rights for all your existing contracts in addition to any new contracts. Ms. Trefkin says yes. Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
General Acock?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Okay, a little bit of house cleaning, but first a question. I want to make sure that the base commanders are held responsible for the well-being of all of the personnel on their base. I don't know any other way to enforce the Bill of Rights than to hold the base commanders responsible. So as we look at this coming NDAA, I will be looking at how that might be accomplished. If a base commander wants his next assignment, he better be sure that the base housing is not an issue in his record. So, and that's based upon General Acock's response to my question that the base commander is responsible for the well-being of all of the personnel on his base or her base. So we'll be looking at that. I want to make sure that the information that we received from the prior session with the advocates becomes part of our record. Ms. Spear and I asked for specific information from those advocates. When that is received, I'd like that with unanimous consent to become part of the record. Without objection, that'll be ordered. Also, written statements from the advocacy groups to be added to the record. Without objection. So ordered. I believe we've run through this. I have committed 2 years ago to stay with this, and I suspect that means as long as I'm here and as long as there's a readiness committee and a personnel committee, we'll be at this. So we'll be doing periodic hearings and briefings and questions, and we've already committed. Ms. Spear is committed to go back to Fort Hood. Maybe she'll invite me to go with her. And we're going to traipse on down to Fort Belvoir and see if Clark has an explanation for the problems there, as well as why they decided to disrespect this committee. Excuse me, disrespect these two committees. So with that, I want to thank our witnesses, Mr. Acock, Ms. Trefkin, and Mr. Taylor. Thank you so very much for participating. This committee is adjourned.